You are now listening to Creative Hora.
Welcome to Creative Hora. I'm Dalia.
And I'm Mary. It's good to be back for another episode with us. I'm really excited for this conversation, friend. And before we kick things off, of course, want to start it off with a quick friend vibe check. So, Dalia, how have you been lately?
Yeah, friend, thank you so much for that question. I really appreciate this check-in. Every time we start off our episode with this, it makes me feel very centered. So I appreciate that. I would say that though I've been feeling a little bit ungrounded actually, which is a very interesting feeling. Yeah, I can always tell when I feel a little bit ungrounded because I feel like I'm playing like catch up on things and not paying so much attention to my present and my day-to-day things that bring me joy. So it's been grounding, which is an interesting thing. Ebbs and flows, friend. Ebbs and flows.
Yeah, did this just start or has it been or was this really recent or within the last few days? Just curious to hear.
Yeah, it's been, I would say like this week primarily has been when I have felt it the most, where I feel like I'm playing catch up a bit. Most like after we came back from a trip to Japan, I felt like it was such a high that
I know.
back from that, I'm just like, okay, I'm still trying to find my footing, and it's been now a month, like almost like I feel like it doesn't even feel that way, which is crazy. But yeah, it's been more recently where I've been feeling a bit ungrounded, so trying to find like small ways to reground and be focused on my day-to-day, be focused on my present has been definitely something that I am welcoming with even the summer solstice and the summer energy, just welcoming more, whether it's just even sunshine into my day-to-day. But
yeah, definitely.
What about you? How are you feeling? What's the vibe today?
Yeah, you know what? I think I've also felt I think last week I felt also very ungrounded, but this week, at least for the most recent couple of days and even right now in the present, um I would say I feel regrounded. I have been getting more sunshine. I've been able to take midday walks to get some sunshine in. Also been doing a lot of reflecting a lot. So lots of just journaling, lots of um just pausing and reflecting. So I think it helps me reground, especially since I felt not so grounded last week. So I would say this week has regrounded me in deep reflection and super grateful for being in that state because I tend to find myself in that state of reflection not all the time, but pretty often. I actually just spoke about it with my partner. It's really funny because she's like, yeah, it's like you have in quotes like a magnifying glass on yourself. And I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. So I thought that was interesting because I am always like in a deep reflection. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, that's such an interesting visual, friend. A magnifying glass.
That's what I said too. I was like, damn, that's how it feels like. And she's pretty good at putting like a visual aspect to kind of give me a visual of like what she means or what she's talking about. So I thought that was an interesting analogy.
Yes, very, very interesting. I definitely, knowing you, I know you're a very reflective person. Definitely enjoy a good journaling session. But yeah, definitely an interesting visual. It makes me, I know we're going to dive into the conversation today, which is, just continue some of those thoughts that we shared around, being our own creative life project and, what that commitment looks like on a day-to-day basis, but also, what it looks like in the next, 3, 6 months, recommitting or committing to our own personal journey as our own creative life project. So when you bring that image of a magnifying glass,
Right?
very feels timely, because coming into this conversation, we wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
unpack a little bit more what it meant to be our own personal creative life project. And so the visual of the
Mm-hmm.
magnifying glass, I feel like it's a perfect transition into that conversation. So it sounds like,
Mm-hmm.
based on what your partner said, um, you know, that commitment to being your own life project is, this visual of a magnifying glass. Tell me more
Yeah.
about that. When she told you that, what did that bring up for you in terms of your reflection process and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think when, even um taking a step back and looking at myself as my own creative life project is it feels loaded. It's like, what does that mean? Or, what does that mean for me personally? What does that mean for me as an upcoming creative co-hosting this podcast, this platform that we have together, where we're trying to really have this genuine human to human connection and connect with other creatives who everyday creatives who also had started their own journey, and dissecting that a little bit more in terms of like what is their life project as a creative look like. So when I hear that in terms of someone that's very close and dear to me saying, yeah, it's like you always view yourself in a magnifying glass. I mean, at first I was like, it was a very good visual. I was like, wow, like I literally pictures myself like with a magnifying glass facing me and who I am. But I think and how that relates to me viewing my life as a creative life project is there is that liberty to direct and produce the life I want to live, and have that creative agency to define what is it that really brings me a lot of joy, a lot of purpose. What is it that nurtures my soul to, yeah, continue to evolve? Almost like that. We've heard it a lot with creatives. Like all the creative projects has this iterative phase where one season it might be this type of creativity, but another season it will evolve to this type of creativity. So I do see those parallels in how I define myself as my own creative life project in life, but then I see it also in how we're continuing this iterative process with even the podcast, and the platform that we're trying to bring. So I think
Yeah.
that's where my mind goes when, yeah, when she's like, yeah, when I heard that comment, and as I connect parallels between, again, me as a upcoming creative with this podcast, but then me individually in my life as an individual on this earth.
Yeah, I love that, friend. I love that because, that inner work and investment that you're doing, like, on yourself, is also allowing Creator Corner to evolve with you as you're making those inner iterations. Which
Mm-hmm.
is, when I think about this word, and when we were talking about the theme about being our own creative life project, it was heavy. It was something that I felt heavy in terms of acknowledging that,
Yeah.
the inner work, the inner growth, the ebbs and flows that we talked about are something that, it's happening for the rest of your life. It's something that is
Mm-hmm.
part of being on this planet and being on this journey, walking this earth, is the acceptance that, you know committing to our inner work, to our inner, seeing
Mm-hmm.
ourselves as a creative life project, is something that, does require, again, that word commitment. It requires a
Mm-hmm.
commitment to ourselves. And this only impacts the space that we're creating together in Creator Corner, in terms of
Right.
the evolution that Creator Corner will go through as we continue to evolve as individuals, as well. But when you think about, commitment, that's sometimes a word that takes people back, and they're like,
Right.
oh, this is
Run.
it. But how do you feel about, committing to yourself, committing to yourself
Mhm.
for as a lifelong project?
Yeah, I think initial thoughts, like, it does bring me a lot of excitement. I think as an individual that's innately, once I commit to something and want to give it my all, it's almost that, like, tenacity I have in me to give it my all. And then with that, I know that there's commitment that evolves over time and will push me to grow. And again, as an individual, just that's super just innately stimulated by growth, by evolution, forward thinking, by movement. I do think I find a lot of excitement. But with that commitment, I think what I would say, like, I struggle with also with that commitment is there is a certain level of intentionality and discipline that must be poured into this commitment. Again, going back to our creative pursuits, whether it's a podcast or whether it's the inner work that I'm doing, the commitment to me looks, it's daily. It's daily pouring in and dividing my energy to creative spaces where it sparks creativity to continue the work that we're doing together as co-hosts, to continue the inner work that I'm doing on myself. It requires that daily practice of that muscle, that creativity muscle, commitment muscle that we're talking about. It's so easy to say, yeah, I've committed to that, but then not exercise that commitment muscle. It could be just through words. And I do find myself a lot in that headspace of verbal commitment per se, and not necessarily the next level of disciplined action oriented commitment. With I do think that's a huge part of, I guess, like when I'm thinking about commitment to myself as a long project, but also the commitment I have to the creative projects I want to pursue. My next thing is going beyond the verbal commitment piece for me.
Wow, wow, friend, thank you so much for breaking down your perspective on what committing to your inner work means to you. It definitely brings up a
Mm-hmm.
lot from in hearing your response. It brings up a lot because the word that comes to mind is
Mm-hmm.
responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
like a
Yeah.
responsibility to myself to show up for
Yes.
myself,
Yes. Yes.
and a responsibility to put in that work on a day-to-day basis. And I'll be honest with
Mm-hmm.
you, friend,
Mm-hmm.
responsibility, man, it's been hard for me. It's definitely
Mm-hmm.
been hard for me. Um, Something that I'm trying to do in that process
Yeah.
as well with commitment is the compassion piece of committing. You're not always going to be
Absolutely.
your the most disciplined. Sometimes you can stay
Right.
away
Definitely.
the things that bring you joy, the things that
Mm-hmm.
are, will make your life easier for future you. So there is those moments. And, the reason why I bring that up is because I told you, this week I've been ungrounded. I have felt
Mm-hmm.
ungrounded,
Yeah.
and I'm in one of those headspaces where I know the things that I should be doing, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
fully, like to your point, taking that action towards that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Part of what the lesson for me has been this week is a lot of compassion to myself, a lot of compassion
Mm-hmm.
and love as I am, navigating, working to be regrounded, because being regrounded is something for me that doesn't happen in a day. It happens, to your point, on like taking those baby steps every single day, on a day-to-day
Right.
basis.
Right.
So what it
Mm-hmm.
has meant to recommit this week for me, it has been acknowledging that I'm ungrounded. It has been acknowledging that I am not at my most like disciplined, or I am not in my, I'm not going to be doing a
Mm-hmm.
hundred things. Today I'm going to
Right.
be doing one or two, and that is enough. So I think part of that
Mm-hmm.
process
Mm-hmm.
of commitment, is also consistently recommitting to,
Mm-hmm.
to myself, and being
Mm-hmm.
kind to myself as I am acknowledging that I may not be, doing all the steps that I need to be doing to be regrounded and feeling present. So yeah, I just
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge
Mm-hmm.
that that's so important. But the piece of, the creative aspect, where the creative part comes in when it comes to doing this inner work, is,
Right.
the piece
Mm-hmm.
that we can imagine, like, so much more possibility when it comes to our daily lives and our personal growth. You mentioned, in our conversations that we had as we were preparing for this episode, that there was certain themes that were coming forward to you as you were thinking about a creative life project. Can you share a little bit about that, friend? Because I loved hearing you talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of themes of being like a creative life work project, something that came to mind is it, taking it in small, like you mentioned, baby steps. Like, what is going back to the whole commitment piece? Like, 3 months commitment look like for me? What does 6 month commitment look like to me? Or even the themes around along the lines of what do you do when there's a creative block or a blockage of any sort, or an inner work blockage for that, for lack of better words too. What do you do in those instances? So that I think I really like the way you frame like that recommitment is also equally important, because you're right. Like, we're not always going to be on 100% in terms of doing everything that we know we should be doing. But what does it mean to your point, like, be compassionate with yourself, and but continue to recommit every time
Yeah.
there are those moments of, again, like, it could be blockages, creative blockages, inner work blockages, whatever emotional blockages, whatever type of blockage. Like, how do you bounce back and recommit to the work, to the project, to the life project that you're working on? So I do think I've found myself in, again, that state of reflection, and at least for me, when there's, like, for example, any type of blockage, whether it's emotional or creative blockages, I do find myself finding ways to re-stimulate my mind, but in a different way. Like, for example, if there's a creative blockage on how we should plan for an episode for the podcast, I won't necessarily read about like how to plan an episode for a podcast, but I go and look at other tools, like, oh, let me read a book about something, like a novel or something that's very different from the project that I'm working on, or that thing that I'm working on, to kind of get my mind re-stimulated and using my imagination in a different way when ideas aren't flowing, when emotions aren't flowing, or when I'm not processing well. I do find myself tapping into getting more information or using my brain in a different capacity. So I think that's definitely one of the themes that I'm exploring in terms of me being a lifelong creative project, among other themes. But I would love to hear kind of your take on what are themes that are coming up for you as you identify yourself as this lifelong creative project, and you are the owner of that project or that creative pursuit.
Yeah, what I love about framing our inner work as a creative life project is just the opportunity of creativity that brings to this lifelong commitment we're doing to ourselves, or committing to ourselves. Because when I think about creativity, I think about infinite potential. I think
Mm-hmm.
about, limitless opportunities. I think about imagination and dreaming big, and, creating something that we didn't even think was possible. Those are some of the things that attract me to creativity. That's why I love the conversations we have with our creators, because they
Mm-hmm.
just share this perspective of, all these ebbs and flows that they go through in their own personal creative projects and artwork, and the way that they're iterating on these works and evolving just reminds me so much about this commitment that we are, you know recommitting to, I guess, on the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
ourselves as that center of that creative life project. I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned in, a previous episode, friend, around my grandma's passing and how that impacted me quite a lot, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
still unpacking that to the in the present moment. But the reason that this impacted me so much is because I've always been someone that, I'm a very whimsical person. I love
Mhm. Mhm.
imagination. I love dreaming big. One of my greatest accomplishments that I share with others is that, the life I'm living now, 5-year old, 10-year old, 15-year old me could have never imagined. It's way more expansive, bigger than
Mm.
I ever thought possible. So
Mhm.
when my grandma passed, I realized that I really disconnected from the ability to dream and dream big for that. So in
Mhm.
this process of recommitting, what that looks like to me in the next 3-6 months is committing to dreaming, which sounds like such a simple thing,
Hmm.
but it is so huge, and it only requires imagination on my end.
Mm.
Things that I don't imagine are possible, but they are when we, because there's no way that we could have told our inner child, at least for me personally, that I'd be here in this place, or I'd be,
Mhm.
working this
Mhm.
job or whatever. There's just so many things that I've done,
Mhm.
that I wouldn't have imagined. So yeah, that's what recommitment looks like to me. That's what
Mhm.
that's a little bit of some of the connections and parallels that I'm seeing between creativity and even my inner work and spirituality as well. So it
Mhm.
feels like this theme about the creative life project, it is heavy, and it is something that
Mhm.
is large in terms of something I'll be working on for the rest of my life, as a human on this planet. But it also brings so much color and possibilities, in terms of my life, and what that final art piece will look like. It could be
Mhm.
evolving and
Mhm.
changing. Yeah, that's things that I definitely appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, I think one, like, thanks for sharing your thoughts on what being like a lifelong creative project look like. But I think that that's what you mentioned in like expansiveness and dreaming big and possible limitless possible. Oh, I do think, at least for me, that is the essence of being a creative and
Mhm.
having creativity in mind, because what one may not think is possible or cannot, or think that you can't dream big or expansive enough, that creative mindset or creative doing, it propels that or challenges that, like that status quo of or of not being able to do certain things, or being limited in certain things, or not being able to dream big, or continue to be on that dream state and use your imagination. So I do think creativity brings out that in a lot of creative, in terms of just thinking and doing and dreaming as big as possible of things that may not be, that others may not think is possible. So I do appreciate you sharing that and finding that in your commitment and recommitment to yourself as this life project that you're doing, or creative life project that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much, friend. I appreciate that response. And, I'm so curious to hear your
Mm-hmm.
perspective on, if we're using this framework as seeing ourselves as this creative life project, a big piece of that is, co-creation, not just with
Mm-hmm.
others, but with the world around us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How are you also, interacting with the environment around you to co-create, this beautiful creative life project? And, would love to hear around even like the partnerships, or the
Mm-hmm.
the things around you, the objects, the environment that is bringing you joy. I'd be so curious to hear about what that co-creation piece looks like for you.
Yeah, when I think of co-creating, I think the first things that come to mind is it pro- moves me to think more inwardly. And what I mean by that is, in order to co-create with you, for example, or even with the creatives that we have on the guest, or even future collaborations that we will have, in this specific creative project that we're doing, the podcast, there has to be an element of me going inwards and asking myself, how do I feel about certain questions that I have, whether it's the creative pursuit that I'm pursuing, or even questions I have about what am I learning about myself as I'm co-creating with these people or co-creating with even the camera that we're using now. Is like, what am I, what is that? What am I learning about myself as I go through this process, this motion of creating and co-creating with one, the like physical, literally living things like humans that I'm co-creating with, but also more so physical objects I'm also using as tools to create. So I do think a lot of that pushes me to think inwardly. And I think that's why, again, like, there's just this innate personality in me to always be in that introspective space. Cause I personally believe that there's a relationship with, again, the tools that I'm using, whether it's the camera, the keyboard, the mouse, this light, this mic. I think there's a purpose and there's a relationship in how I can continue to create what I'm creating. And more importantly, like, how do I like provide that space for myself to co-create with everything and everyone that is involved in this creative process. I mean, it sounds super abstract, but I do think personally there is an intentionality behind like being very grateful and being super present with the things around me as I'm creating things, whether it's creating the episode or creating thoughts on my journal in terms of what I want to talk about in the episode. So I think that's where I that's where co-creation looks like for me, is looking inwardly, and everything that's around me is how I co-create and how I want to co-create and continue to co-create with. That was so many co-create using co-create in one sentence, but yeah, I mean, I ended there. I think again, it's just the intentionality behind everything that's around me, everyone that's around me, the energy that's being surrounded by, the space that I'm creating.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, friend. The reason why I was so curious about your perspective on co-creation is because
Mhm.
a lot of the times when people think about, committing to yourself, to the inner work, it sometimes feels like a lonely path. It's like you're
Mhm.
kind of doing
Mhm.
this on your own. And,
Yeah.
sometimes that means that maybe relationships will evolve, or, you'll outgrow relationships. And there's all these thoughts about, yeah, it's a lonely path. And I actually don't think
Mhm.
so. I think that there's so much opportunity to not just co-create with your environment, to your point, the objects around you that you're interacting with, but
Mhm.
also with the people around you. For me,
Mm.
co-creation is such a necessary part of the life project, because we're all innately
Mhm.
human, and we all, I truly believe, we seek that connection with others. And so for me, I actually rely more on co-creation when I am
Hmm.
feeling ungrounded.
Mm.
you know, it means seeking others, seeking my siblings, even seeking the
Yeah.
love for my pets,
Yes. Yes.
seeking, yeah, that connection with
Yes. Yeah.
the people around me, but also the environment around me. Like one small thing that I started to notice was, like, the wind has become something that I'm very hyper aware of,
Hmm.
because it just reminds me of my grandma. And it's like a small thing, right? But if I could be so
Mhm.
busy that I don't notice the way that the wind is blowing, I could
Mhm.
just ignore that and move on my day to day. But when I sit with myself, when I open myself to that co-creation with my environment, I can pay attention to the birds chirping, or the way the wind is blowing and the leaves are shuffling,
Right.
and the way that that makes me feel reminded of my grandma. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah. It's
love this
beautiful.
piece of co-creation, because our the artists that we're chatting with, they're co-created with the tools that they're also utilizing, whether
Mhm.
it's digital tools, whether it's
Mhm.
collaborations that they're co-creating with, or
Mhm.
even the people around them, the community around them that they're co-creating with. So I really
Right.
love those parallels as well with creativity. And as we're even like chatting right now, there's literally like a white butterfly on my window that's flying around. And
Oh, there
it's
you
just like
go.
small. it's just small affirming things that they could mean nothing, but if you're open to receiving, they could bring you a little bit of joy and
Mhm.
just to
Mhm.
affirm a little bit the environment that you're in the present moment. But thank you
Yeah.
for sharing your thoughts, friend, on co-creation for you. As we are, as we're thinking about the next 3 6 months of what it looks like to commit to our inner work, I am so curious to hear, friend, if there's anything that you are releasing as we are shifting towards
Mhm.
our bonfire moment here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely love the bonfire moments where again we have this opportunity at the end of the episode to release, let go, whatever we're thinking or whatever it's in mind or even thoughts and or energies that we want to release. But I think for me specifically, what I'm releasing as part of the, I guess as we're wrapping up the episode, is the idea that I would say it's okay to be my own magnifying glass. I think when going back to the beginning, when I first heard that, I was like, is it too much or am I overdoing it in terms of being my own magnifying glass? But I'm letting that go and I'm fully embracing and accepting that I like this magnifying glass that I have on myself and it brings me a lot of joy. So just releasing the any thoughts or any emotions I had in terms of concept, like thinking about if it was I was overdoing it or doing too much of it. It's something that I'm releasing. And again, because I think it's just part of the creative process. That's how I process things, and that's how I want to continue to process the creativity and the life project that I'm creating. So definitely letting that go. How about you, friend? What are you releasing at this moment?
Yeah, that's such a loaded question for me in the moment. But
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I say it's loaded is because, I'm in a place right now where I'm trying to reground myself, right? So bringing forward, things, back to basics, if we're thinking about it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Things that are small that I know will bring me joy, like, picking up a book that I like without expectation, or a
Mm-hmm.
poetry book. And there's a park that I live nearby that I don't visit often, but going to the park and reading a poetry book, like just simple basic
Mm-hmm.
stuff,
Mm-hmm.
um, to reconnect with myself. But what I am releasing at least in this next stage of growth, as I am recommitting to myself,
Mm-hmm.
is this fear of the unknown. Because we talked about the unknown actually being a really great place for creativity. You can fill it with colors,
Mm-hmm.
you can fill it with glitter and stars, or whatever you want to fill it
Mm-hmm.
with. And being in a place where I'm still trying to understand what my purpose is, in terms of even just a larger career path,
Mm-hmm.
or what I want to do on a larger scale like that. I just want to release that fear of the unknown, because there's times when I grapple with
Mm-hmm.
that and I'm thinking, at this point I should know what I want to be doing. I should know what
Mm-hmm.
my purpose is.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have inklings, I do have signs about things that I should be doing in terms of my purpose. But does it align with my career at the moment? Not exactly. So in terms of how it's going to play out,
Mm-hmm.
I want to release that fear, or even that desire to know how it will play out, because I think that's part
Yeah.
of this life journey, is not knowing, and being okay with not knowing, because that's actually what it allows so much creativity to come forward in this life project. So yeah, I'm really excited
Love that.
about that, to release that unknown, to
Yes.
embrace
Yes.
all those colors and art that wants to come, be added to my creative life project, is
Yes.
what I'm looking forward to.
No, I love that, friend. I think, I mean, I'm a culprit myself of having that fear of the unknown sometimes, but I do love you calling that in and releasing that unknown or and just embracing and bringing in all the colors that want to come into your life creative project. So I love that.
Thank you, friend. for our listeners, we are so curious to hear, what does commitment to yourself look like? And on that end, what are you letting go of in that process as you recommit to yourself?
Thanks for tuning in. Creative Hora is a podcast production hosted by Dalia Zaragoza and Mary Figueroa. This episode is edited by Abdullah Kawish and is produced by akstudio.global.